Welcome, LYS family. I'm so happy you could be here today to join us for a special conversation with Mrs. Alexandra Okeke Banks. We're so happy to have you with us to talk about the start of the new school year and what we can do to give parents, teachers, and students a great start to the school year.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I am in mental health. I'm a licensed practicing counselor, but I was also a teacher for some time. So I taught for 4 years. I taught 8th grade while I was getting my master's. And then when I graduated with my master's in clinical mental health counseling, I've been doing counseling since. And I went from being a teacher in schools to being a counselor in schools, which is a very different type of role for me. And I really love it. I really like it. I like the fact that there are things that I get to address with students that I didn't get to address as a teacher because, I got a bunch of kids in my class. I have to meet TEKs, all those things. And so I've been doing that since. And right now I specialize with trauma and multicultural counseling within the education setting. And then, of course, anxiety and depression and whatever my kiddos bring in. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. You brought up a really good point when you said you used to be in the classroom, and it's like a difference in perspective, right? Because you're in the classroom, you're with about 20 to 30 kids, and now you get to look at like a wide scope. So you get to see like so much more, right? You get to see like a full perspective. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. So without more being said, let's go ahead and get into some of those questions, right?
Yeah.
What are the biggest issues you see students going through right now?
So I think I could honestly say there's probably something having to do with the social, the emotional, and the learning aspect. At least one for each. But in regards to social, a lot of kids nowadays, most of their interactions happen through social media or some type of device. And so in general, even before the pandemic, we had so many kids that were very socially awkward or very anxious about being social. And so I think that has just magnified significantly after COVID and being on lockdown and things like that. And so I've had a lot of students who were having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, just at the idea of having to be in class, having to answer questions or having to ask questions, whether it was over Zoom or in person. And so I think a lot of just social anxiety for sure. And then, anxiety also related to COVID, as adults, a lot of us have been anxious about COVID because we don't know what it means, or we're not sure, or there's so many pieces of information that contradict, each other, and we're not exactly sure what's real and what's not and all that. And so I think even more so because we're, kiddos are, don't have the capacity all the time to process through things. They've kind of fed off of parents and family members' anxiety and fear. And so there's a lot of kids that just have extreme anxiety about being sick, extreme anxiety about losing family members and things like that. And so definitely that. And then with the learning aspect, I mean, if you have, we have those hierarchy of needs. If the kids don't feel safe and they're not getting what they need, emotionally or safety wise, they can't learn. That's just not going to be there for them. And so I think a lot of our kiddos have been just unable to even take in new information, in the classroom or on Zoom. And yeah, again, with being on Zoom, the kids have a hard time connecting. You have kids who have not seen other kids in over a year, unless it's their own family members. But you got those only child families too who haven't seen kids in just about a year. So that's been rough too. So there's quite a bit of things, a lot of anxiety, both social and, just related to COVID. But as well as that, just inability to learn in the way that they need to, just because of the environment. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much. You were speaking to my soul when you were talking about, I think one of the biggest issues teachers had to deal with was, especially with like Zoom calls, students that were like, you're trying to set those expectations, keep your camera on, this, that, and the third. And you got students who just, for whatever reason, refuse. Mm-hmm. And after so many times, teachers, I know, talk to a lot of teachers, they're just like, they won't keep these cameras on. And so I think the really awesome thing, right? Because you have to take your negatives and you have to find a way to turn them into positives, or you have to try to understand why it's a negative behavior, is, like you said, thinking about what the kid's actually going through, that makes them do that. So I thank you so much for that. That was wonderful.
Yeah. And, another thing I would like to add is just there's, especially with certain populations in Texas that are, economically disadvantaged, or, they just have a lot of family issues, being at home is not the most safe or comfortable place for them. And so having to do school at home is, some of them are like, nope, not happening, And so we also have to consider that, as that, some kids come from really rough home situations, and their school is their safe place. And so not being able to be at school is extremely overwhelming for them and stressful. And a lot of times they end up having to endure, whatever unhealthy home situation for an extended period of time because of it. And so, yeah, they end up coming back to school with just that much more issues.
Absolutely. That's right. Okay. So what are some things students, parents, and teachers should be looking for in students or children that are dealing with like social emotional learning issues or just personal issues?
Yeah. So I think, when it comes to being in a school setting, we obviously see that one kiddo who is loud, who has outbursts, emotional, screaming, throwing desks, what have you, and has those just very obvious behavioral issues. But I think also it's really important to consider the quiet kids. And that's, even as a teacher myself, like I remember being like, oh yeah, he's a great kid. Well, have you ever heard him speak? Have you ever seen him with other students interacting? Well, no. Okay, well, why is that? And so I think not just giving attention to those kids who are kind of screaming for it, but also for the ones that aren't. And so those are going to be the kids that are really quiet, the ones that you don't see interacting, the ones that don't really want to speak in class, or the ones that speak under their breath and don't really think anyone's listening. And so I think, a lot of times, yeah, we want to focus on those loud kids, but the quiet ones, definitely need that help and support as well. And I think another thing I would say is just using your intuition. A lot of teachers, families, counselors, staff, they're in, the education field because they feel some type of connection to children in general. And so I think after a year of COVID, we can be like, listen, no more, but I think we got to kind of go back to that original purpose of like connecting with kids and trusting our intuition when it comes to figuring out like what kid is in need. And so I find that when I tell teachers to do that, they're like, okay, I have a list of students that I'm thinking of right now. Cause it is a gift to be able to connect with students and know what's going on, whether it's education or emotional or whatever. But yeah, so I would say also just using intuition as well as trying to check in on those more quiet and kind of invisible, kiddos.
I think that's wonderful. You're reminding me of a student that I had my second year of teaching, and she was about 5'6", 5'7" in the sixth grade. And I remember we did this activity, and you would do like Apple or Android or Pepsi Cola, and I think I said, would you either do something, or what superpower would you have? And she would always say, I want to be invisible. She would always say that. And I don't know what it was, like you said, intuition. I remember going to her and just writing something. I was just like, I just want to let you know that I know you always say you want to be invisible, but I see you, just, something small, just to let them know that it's one of those things that helps you build that connection with the student. And it's like you said, I think that's going to be really, really important this year for a lot of students, teachers, and parents to really mesh and have that connection.
For sure. Yeah.